Hey, everybody. Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Barry Cruz, and with me, as always, are my fabulous co-hosts.
Oh, hey there. Hey there, hey there, hey there, hey there.
Hey.
It's me, Jackie.
There we go. And it's me, Diana. Hi.
Good to see you both.
Weird. That was weird.
We're not recording in our typical space.
You
which
cannot.
Throws off a lot of my podcast behavior.
It's so true.
So where are we right now?
We are in a boardroom.
Hopefully our listeners aren't in the boardroom.
Some of them are.
Hey-o.
We
do.
have some listeners here.
We do have some. We have a guest. We
shout
have some
out.
guests. We have an
Shout
open
out.
door policy because we are in Utica, New York, at the Compassionate Care Conference. 2024 is the year. And we're very fortunate to come and talk about behavior analysis with a lot of awesome people. And we have a little space to do this episode. What's this episode, you might say? Well, it's an episode of our podcast, which is about behavior analysis and behavior analytic research. And every week we pick a topic and review relevant research articles, except for weeks like this, when we review the articles that you, the listener, have voted on. We have a poll every season. Not the articles themselves, but the topics. Every season, we do a listener choice episode. We put up some choices, and the winner this season, the summer of 2024, was ABA as a service, which is kind of a broad topic, but we really thought, let's look about what is our field doing in terms of business and quality. Business progress,
time.
industry. So we're going to be looking at some articles related to ABA, not just as an amazing practice application of science, but as something that people pay for. And are they getting their money's worth? All this and more after the weather. But let's get started with our articles. So thanks for everyone who voted on this topic. We hope to do justice. If you are a subscriber on our Patreon page, you have a fabulous video of the conference room. Hi, that you are getting a little before everyone else. The unedited audio where we messed around and sang songs. I don't remember if your song was on the recording, Diana.
It certainly was.
And if people come in and out, well, maybe they'll get to be on the videos. But for everyone else, you're just going to hear the edited professional version of the full show. So Diana, what are the articles that we will be discussing today?
Okie dokie. So we have 3 different pieces of writing to review today. The first one is U.S. Employment Demand for Behavior Analysts 2010 to 2023. That was published by the Behavior Analyst Certification Board in 2024. Also, Board Certified Behavior Analysts and School Fidelity of Applied Behavior Analysis Services, Qualitative Findings by Max and Lambright, published in the International Journal of Developmental Disabilities, 2022. And Exploring Quality in the Applied Behavior Analysis Service Delivery Industry by Silbaugh and El al. That was published in Behavior Analysis and Practice, 2022.
All right.
Can I tell you something?
Of course.
Yeah.
Top secret. When you said this was going to be a topic, I was like, there are no articles on this topic. And then there was some.
So, spoiler alert, Jackie, sometimes when I suggest this might be a good topic, I already know that there are articles about that topic.
Well, I know that, but I was just very surprised that we could find some.
Well, as we're going to talk about today, there aren't a lot of topics or a lot of articles or meaningful research on quality in ABA. And another spoiler alert, even the article that's talking about quality in ABA, I think we all question whether it actually completes its mission of fully defining what ABA quality services should be.
It's a great starting point.
Oh,
Exactly.
It definitely is.
It's a great
So if there's like virtually no research or writing in an area, that initial paper is not going to solve the issues that it raises, but it's going to probably raise the issues well. And I think that article does do that.
I keep thinking, what is the topic that no one's written anything about that I can just be like,
Found it.
Here's some random thoughts I had. And not that this is a random thoughts article.
No.
It was a very well-written article. But you could sort of just be like, I did a survey, I guess, and no one's written on it. So this is the best research that exists.
It's also surprising that there is not more written on this topic because it is, I don't know. I don't even know what to say. It's like integral to our daily interactions in our field.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's very different when we're talking about the idea of quality control an ABA services is not the same as is ABA effective, which again, looking at different studies, we're looking at randomized control trials. How did they choose the studies that they put into their meta-analyses? But overall, the science is solid that ABA is awesome and has helped thousands and thousands and thousands of people, if not more. But when we talk about a service industry, we're not just looking at the individual, we're looking at scale. How does our science sell as a meaningful product? And there are a lot of variables that, as people who love the science but don't love business, would never have thought to look into when talking about this. So I think it's a definition. It's a definition problem as well.
Yeah, and one thing that I think it's necessary, I mean, more than necessary now when you look at ABA companies now being owned by non-behavior analysts and maybe those smaller companies being subsumed by private equity agencies, right? So it's more about for profit and less about for outcomes and for larger scale, high quality programming, right? Because that's, I mean, I'm sure they want to do a good job, but they also want to make money.
Yeah.
And so I think this topic is really relevant now, more so than it ever has been in the past, because I think previously, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, right? Companies were run by behavior analysts with behavior analysts in charge, right? So the science was, I think, more present than it is now, where you have bigger companies that are run by HR departments or business people or...
Yeah, and I think there's an understanding that the people at the top had a strong understanding of behavior analysis, the behavior analytic principles, and also were required to adhere to the same ethics code that we know and love. And that's not to say that business owners are unethical or anything like that, but it's...
You want to say that though, don't you, Diane?
No, I don't, because we don't know that, and there's not evidence to think that, but...
When you changed, man, this would be way more against the system.
But you can't have the expectation now. I think that everyone has the same perspective that you do, who might be running a company, but those folks have a lot of impact on what the structure of the company is like, what the culture of the company is like, what the training that the folks in the company are receiving looks like, and then ultimately what the services for the clients, therefore, looks like. So it's a total trickle-down effect here, and it's something that, because our industry has grown and changed so much, so rapidly, we're probably playing catch-up a little bit in determining what that landscape really looks like and what are the guardrails or the safeguards that may be in place in order to ensure quality services.
Right. And one thing I think it's helpful in the new ethics code, the 2022 ethics code, is now in previous ethics codes, they didn't require, they were like, you can't use testimonials. But then the HR people or the marketing people would be like, well, I don't have to follow that ethics code and you can't do anything about it. But now in the 2022 ethics code, in almost all of the ones that rely on advertising or talking about clients in a public statement, I think that's standard 5, is now they say, if your company is doing this, you need to take every step that you possibly can to make it stop and document if it's not working and talk to relevant personnel. So it's not like...
It's like them saying, that's not what we meant.
Right? Right? They're like, we still need you to do it. And now the BCBAs are responsible for what their agencies are doing.
Yeah.
So I think that helps. And I have seen, because one of my favorite activities in our ethics class is to look for organizations that use wrong testimonials or may, have grandiose claims on their website, such as like, there was a few that says like, oh yeah, ABA cures autism.
No.
Oh yeah, there's a few. And then I would report them each year as part of the ethics class.
That was your reinforcer.
Yeah, that was my reinforcer. And so sorry, agencies, if now you know, but I had to reach out to them and let them know that I was going to report them. But I have seen less of that. Since the 2022 code has come in, I've seen less of that, because I think now BCBAs have more of a responsibility in making sure their companies are engaging in ethical behavior.
It's just not just that you ferreted them all out on the internet.
Right. Maybe.
all the companies that Jackie targeted are out of business.
I can say that one of my favorite things to do when I'm tired in the late nights is to go onto like Facebook groups, and if somebody's like asking for treatment help, to tell them that it's unethical.
You might need better hobbies.
Being a scold on the internet, everyone's favorite hobby.
It's like I'm not mean about it. I'm just like, you should talk to your mentor.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like
it's true.
It's true.
Yep.
But it's like one of my like, it's like a personal satisfaction, weird thing that I love to do.
All right.
I don't do it under my own name.
All right. Well, while Jackie's doing that, let's talk about where the field is in terms of business. So BACB recently released their employment demand, which is one of those exciting documents that we all look at and say, look at our field, it's doing better than ever. So according to the Lightcast software, which analyzes employment data from 2010 to 2023, demand for behavior analysts increased every single year. And in the past year of reporting, 2022 to 2023, we saw a 14% increase. Now, again, from a business perspective, a business in which the demand for your product increases year after year after year for over 10 years, you're doing something right, from a business only perspective.
Right. Yeah.
We see the growth is...
That's what they call hand over fist.
Really?
I don't know if... Yes, maybe? I don't
know that.
That's one of those expressions that I feel like I might say and be like, I don't know what I'm talking about. No one call me on this, please. I hope Jackie doesn't Facebook scold me about my use of this.
I would call it nipping in the bud.
Usually that graph has an exponential increase curve to it. I don't know if 14% is actually going to be exponential, but increases nonetheless.
Yeah. We see a lot of growth in California, Massachusetts, Florida, Texas, and Georgia as kind of the highest need. So even though there's growth, it does seem like they are responsible for like a huge chunk of the growth. It's like 40% of the demand was in those states. So there is a sense of we've got a product that people want. And we are going to be talking a little bit about ABA as a product. Now, exactly what is that product? Principles of behavior. It's going to be a common theme. Looking back, talking about what is good services, because I think where we need to come in is just because there is a need for ABA services does not mean that we are now providing good ABA services. Most of the areas in which families or different stakeholders are looking for ABA services are often in a place where they need help. So if you're coming in with whatever snake oil you got, there's a good chance your business is going to do well for at least a while. And while we could sit back and say, and since that's been over 13 years that we've seen this data specifically, that must mean that ABA is a product that not only we know from the science is good, but we know must be good for everybody because they keep buying it and paying for it.
Or
what else I would like you to play devil's advocate because I think that's the point of the show today.
Good. Or it could be that there's nothing else, right? And if the Surgeon General says you should do it, right? And that all the eclectic treatments aren't working, or a school system wants to look on the outside that they are supporting their special education students and those that have varying needs. If you hire one BCBA for your district, then you can say in those meetings, well, we've got a BCBA. Without actually providing great services. Like there's a very large school that has a lot of BCBAs, right? But probably not enough BCBAs for all the students that they have. But right, they can say they have BCBAs. So is that a good service or not?
Just demand does not indicate quality or effectiveness, because there are lots of fads out there that are very much in demand but have neither of those two things.
I know. I probably succumbed to a few of them.
You want to tell us which one?
No. Don't out me.
So we have an employment demand.
But it may speak to social validity.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's something going on with this ABA stuff that is leading to a service industry that is in demand. People want BCBAs. They want BCABAs. They want RBTs.
They don't really want BCABAs.
Well, that decreased a little bit.
Yeah.
But they've relatively been...
Maybe explain. So that she's only saying that because there was a slight drop in demand for BCA. But that doesn't mean that they're not valued members of their...
100% they are. Yeah, I'm just saying that there was a drop.
Okay.
So the question now becomes, all right, well, why? Why do people want these services? And as practitioners, we could just sit back and say, you know what? I bet it's because the science, anyway, write me a big check. However, as ethical people who love our science and know that it does a good job, but could always be doing better, we need to be having conversations about quality services to keep both growing the science, growing the change factor that ABA provides in using ABA services. And then also, because everything needs money to go, we do need to kind of be doing this all under the auspices of, are we making more money year after year? Because capitalism. So
because capitalism.
So the question that is going to come up and is a huge component of our articles today are, what the heck do we mean when we say quality ABA services? Are we talking 7 dimensions? Are we talking good evidence-based practices? Are we talking about good results? Are we talking about high social validity results? What does quality mean? And so these articles are going to be looking to define quality, getting closer, but maybe not getting where they need to be. And I would say kind of the take home. I don't want to give the take home too early in the podcast, but
because then people are going to stop listening.
Well, if they want their code words, they gotta listen to the whole
They
thing.
already checked out.
But when we're talking about quality services, I question all of us in saying to ourselves, what does it mean? Because I think everyone would say, do you want to provide high quality ABA services? I would like to say 100% of BCBAs, RBTs, BCABAs would say, of course I want to provide quality services. And if I say, what do you mean by quality services? I think we'd all say a bunch of words after that, and we'd say a bunch of things that we've heard or seen or believe. And then when I asked, how do you know that's quality? I think we'd get another pause like that. And then people would try to come up with reasons. And I can't say any of those reasons would be good or bad. They'd be reasons. Some would be better than others, but none of them would get at the question of what are high quality ABA services. And another spoiler, at the end of this podcast, we will not give you the answer because it's not quite out there, but we're going to give you some ideas.
We're going to get you a lot closer to it. It's not that it's undefinable.
No, but it's not as easy to define as I think we would like it to be.
Right. I think the issue is often we talk about quality with the presumption that everyone knows what it means. And it's one of those things you don't think about until you stop to think about it and realize, oh, maybe we don't all have the same definition, or we haven't fully thought about all the potential facets.
So when we talk about quality in a service, and this is kind of a mix of some of the Max article as well as the
Silberg,
as well as the Silberg article. But quality was a term used first in the 1300s to describe across disciplines and industries kind of this general definition around, quote, the personally defined expectation for a product or service. There is, quote, some sense of durability or reliability of the good or service.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
But it comes down to it being somewhat a dynamic process, which makes it a little harder to define.
Mm-hmm.
There's
both articles do say that in order for it to be high quality, it does need to adjust with the current context.
Yes.
So that's important, but also makes it harder.
Yeah. So we can't say these are the 7 dimensions of quality and they're always the same. And as long as you're scoring A's on all of them, you're good. So I want to start talking a little bit about the Max and Lambright paper, not because I think it answers all of the questions, but because I think it reflects.
Well, it's a study.
It's a study, unlike the Silberg, which is more a discussion. But I think it reflects a lot of the challenges that we see around quality. So in this study, there was a gap in literature, which we all could kind of tell by doing a search on this, of fidelity of ABA services, specifically for autistic students in this case, that could lead to poor outcomes. And so the study was really looking at kind of a qualitative study of what are the ABA services in our school districts and why might there be a lack of fidelity of ABA programs?
I just want you to know that while I was reading this article, I was so hoping that I could be in that principal office so the study was done by a principal and a BCBA. And I bet what happened is the BCBA came in and was complaining to the principal and was like, why can't anyone do what I need them to do?
Mm-hmm.
Why is there such low fidelity in my program? I'm trying my best. It's not working. And then the principal probably was like, I don't know. Why don't we find out? Because spoiler alert, it is a qualitative study.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's not typically what is done in behavior analysis, although it's getting more prominent. We've talked about it a few times now. It's like our theme.
Yes. And here at this conference, it's come up like 3 separate times
which
as well.
It's weird for us, but yeah. And so I wonder if the principal, because the principal had a doctorate, they don't tell us in what, No, they don't say it. They just say a doctorate.
Okay.
And so maybe the principal's research was in qualitative research, and the principal said, hey, why don't we do a study on figuring out why this is happening? And the BCBA is like, cool. I need to do a research study for Capella University because it was approved by Capella University's IRB board. And so they made it work. I love this team, this principal BCBA team.
It is
I
very
thought
cool.
you were going to
Can't wait
say,
for their show.
and then they realized their definition of study was completely different.
I don't think so.
In any case, great question. Why are we not getting the fidelity we need in our services, and how do we provide better fidelity services? So they did a good survey, a nice qualitative study. They looked at kind of BCBA experiences in the schools. What's your process? What are the trainings? How do you do monitoring of the programming? What are the barriers that you see? And
It's really important to say that they were open-ended questions as well.
which you're going to need for your good qualitative study.
Right. Very open-ended.
So we had 3 themes that came out of their survey. One was around training and implementation of programs. One was around the use of ABA principles in guiding the processes. And one was around specifically barriers. So patterns of challenges with support from administration, lack of resources, lack of buy-in. So again, what were the kind of barrier themes?
And can we, because not many people are used to thinking about qualitative designs, so can I just talk about how that happened?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so how that happened was they only had 10 participants, probably because they didn't have time to look at more.
Well, they're in a district also, so it might be that
Right.
these are the only
10
BCBAs
Right.
that we have access to.
Right, or the teachers. They surveyed
did have some
teachers.
teachers.
But so what they did is they asked all of the questions. They were all open-ended questions. And then the first thing they do is they read all the responses first to figure out whether there are any patterns. They came up with 14 different patterns. And then the principal then looked at the 14 different patterns, and together the BCBA and the principal identified those 3 themes that you had talked about that were consistent across all of the different patterns.
Yeah.
They lumped them together.
And certainly,
You're going to need a spreadsheet.
Certainly, we're not going to go into like a ton of detail. I mean, it's a short study, but sort of, looking at some of the responses. I mean, they talked about the procedure being very consultative model, which is often what you see. BCBA is consulting to frontline providers. In this case, it would be more teachers, but could be, paraprofessionals, RBTs. How did they talk about their interventions that they were using? Was there training? Again, they didn't say BSD specifically, but it was a lot of modeling, coaching, monitoring through observations over time. They used a lot of candy in this survey, which to my response was like, come on, seriously? Like, this is an important part of your study, is how much candy your district is budgeting for. A lot of people.
That's something they thought, like, it's something that's
It came up enough that it was
right?
part of the themes,
Yeah.
candy usage. And then themes around barriers are ones that I think we traditionally see. Not everyone agrees with the use of ABA. Not everyone likes the principle of reinforcement because they might have a misunderstanding of how it could be used or how it might be used. Hey, maybe if they're using only candy, perhaps there was a good reason for them to be concerned about how reinforcement was being implemented in this district. Not enough time, not enough money to pay for the trainings needed. So again, this really did give you a sense of the big picture of we need to have consistent trainings, we need to have consistent follow-up, and we need to be working with stakeholders to ensure their understanding of what the services are.
I think theme 1 really ties into theme 3, sadly, right?
Mhm.
I just spoiled it. So you can talk about the other 2 themes, but just in the back of your head, when you hear theme 3, realize that it's probably tying very closely into theme 1.
So when it comes to the quality of ABA services, I think this study captures a lot of what you would see in any study talking about quality or most writing about quality of. These all sound like very ideas that are very true to the principles of ABA, to the science of use of evidence-based practice, to the science of meaningful training, to some of the consistent barriers that need to be monitored and staff how need to be supported in how to overcome those barriers. But at the end of the day, do we have a sense that if all of these procedures were in place and all of these barriers were overcome, this program would provide quality ABA services?
You'd hope so, right?
But again, you'd hope so.
Yeah, you wouldn't, I don't know, but you'd hope that if there was support, right, there's resources, there's strong consultative services and or potentially in-person, observations, that you would see better outcomes.
But the question still remains, is quality defined as an outcome, or is quality defined as the process, or both?
Both. Or neither.
I knew
Probably
you were going to do that.
It's always both. The answer is always both. And that
Or neither.
it could be neither. And that leads us to
Grad school tip, guys. The answer is always both.
Or neither.
That leads us to Silva and Fatal's article, which is mostly where we're going to be talking for the rest of this episode, exploring quality in the service delivery industry. Some of the big questions that come when we're talking about why would we need to know about quality? It's like, well, we need to make sure that we're promoting quality ABA services. If we don't have a definition of what quality ABA services are, it makes it very hard for stakeholders to know, where do we put the money? Because if everybody has an ABA company, some of them are bad, some of them are good, some of them are mediocre, there's no way to judge which one should be getting the most funding. If you're looking for employees, where should the employees be going to further their skills of quality ABA service provision? Also, how do we know which of these are
Sounds
actually...
like they're going to be like a silversmith apprentice.
Oh, on the Oregon Trail, you need to make sure you stock up on ABA before you head over the river.
We just got
get dysentery.
our family just bought a new copy of Johnny Tremaine. So
Yeah, we almost bought 2 copies of Johnny
Almost.
Tremaine. There were so many.
I don't know what that is.
It's the
Johnny
Newbery
Tremaine?
Award-winning Johnny Tremaine.
you have to read that
No,
in like 7th grade.
no,
No.
He was like Paul Revere's like apprentice.
No.
He was there at the Revolution.
didn't.
He burned his hand in a crucible.
I don't know any of this.
Okay.
Oh, it's a Disney movie.
Is it?
Also
yeah,
that.
yeah, there's a Disney movie. It's an old Disney movie.
I do not want to watch it.
Oh.
All right.
Anyway,
I have derailed us.
It's too late. It's once it gets. It
is
very-
kinda late.
yeah,
It's
we got
very
used to
early.
recording in the morning, and now we're recording at
It's-
night.
If it's very early or very late, you can tell because of the rant a little bit more.
All right.
So again, not having these measures makes it hard to judge, are we accomplishing any meaningful goals? And are we setting our field up for continued success? Or are we just creating an industry that is looking at short-term profit? And at some point, everyone will decide, we hate this service and we weren't measuring it really well and we can't make a good defense as to why they should keep funding ABA. And then we go the way of the dinosaurs as a field, which none of us want, because we know these principles are important for humanity. But if we can't prove it by giving quality services, by not defining exactly what quality services are, it's going to be really, really hard to make this case. So before we talk about what does exist when we talk about quality in any service, we're going to take a little break and then we'll be right back.
Do you want to be a BCBA?
Sure, we all do.
Now you can come to Regis College in Weston, Mass. to get your graduate degree.
Choose from any one of these courses.
Masters of Science in Applied Behavior Analysis.
Masters of Science in Special Education.
Dual degree in Special Ed and ABA.
Or be eligible for your postmaster's certificate.
You can complete your degree and be ready to sit for the exam in 2 years. And our 2017 grads had a 100% pass rate on the BACB exam.
Come enjoy practicum placement support, ethics mini handbooks, PhD level professors, small class sizes, and a service trip to Iceland.
If interested, don't delay. Supplies are limited. Learn more at regiscollege.edu.
Again, that's www.regiscollege.edu, regiscollege.edu. One more time, www.regiscollege.edu.
See you there!
And we are back talking about quality control in the ABA service industry. But before we continue, I want to remind all of our listeners that ABA Inside Track is ACE and QABA approved. By listening, you're able to earn 1 learning credit. All you need to do is finish listening and then go to our website, abainsidetrack.com, or click the link in your show notes to go magically be whisked away to the page. And you need to enter in some key information, including 2 secret code words that we've hidden in the episode. I'm going to give you the first one now. It is Riggis, Riggis. Diana put an apostrophe in there. I don't think there is an
That's
apostrophe
just
in
so
there.
we knew how to pronounce it.
Oh, okay. It's Riggies. If you have never been to Utica, there's a specialty dish called chicken Riggies, which is a rigatoni pasta with like kind of a hot sauce with some cherry peppers and chicken. It's very good. We had some for lunch. I had some for dinner yesterday. It was really cool. A nice local dish. So again, that's Riggies.
It is good.
It is. Dinah agrees. It is good. Oh, and also don't forget, if you are a patron at the $5 and up level, you're going to have a secret code word that only you will know. It's on the page where we post the video version, the uncut version of this episode. Will also be a link in the regular show notes. So no matter where you are, you'll go to the page. But only if you're a subscriber at that level will you be able to access that page. That'll have a bonus code word that you can enter at checkout to get a free CE. So 100% discount for listening to this episode, just as a big thanks from us for supporting us on Patreon. So again, if you're at the $5 and up level, look for that link so you can get that extra code. It's like a third secret code.
It's kind of awesome.
It's kind of...
I think I just didn't realize that we were doing that.
We've done this for
right
like
now.
2 or 3 years and you're just realizing it now.
Well, that's nice of us.
Apparently not good quality of Patreon descriptions on my part then. All right.
It's like, whatever, Rob, whatever you want to do.
There's enough of me just zoning out at this point. All right. So we're talking about quality. And as our authors sort of talk about, Silbaugh and Fatal talk about, we need to know quality. So they did a search of readily accessible resources to behavior analysts. They looked at some textbooks. They looked at journals. They looked at online resources.
They looked at the State Department of Education.
Yeah.
I think they were very thorough in their looking.
They did a good job
Yeah.
and looked at a lot of places that you might not think to look just to see, has anyone defined quality in the service?
Even blogs.
I would question looking at the blogs, but hey,
still,
no stone unturned, I guess.
Blogs, professional organizations. They looked a lot. University programs.
Yeah.
They looked everywhere.
And what they found were lots and lots of statements around quality being something of value. Found some definitions in the performance management literature about what quality is or is not. Words around it should have to do with the accuracy of performance. It should have to do with class, which is sort of the superiority of a product related to sort of some of those kind of form or the manner of the product. So things beyond, is the product doing the thing it says it's going to do? And then the novelty of the product. Is this something different than what would otherwise be sold or provided? Is it unique?
That one for me felt weird
Mhm.
when I read that one, because if something is high quality, like if you get like a high quality like couch,
Mhm.
for instance, right? If we're talking about products, right? It's like a durable couch. It's going to last a long time. The upholstery is nice, right? But it might not be novel, right? It might not be like a new couch,
Mhm.
right? It'll look like a couch. So that part seemed weird to me, because let's say behavior analytics services are in the mainstream setting, right? Or special education services are in mainstream setting. They shouldn't be novel,
Mhm.
right? They should be what is typically happening in the educational setting. So that one felt weird for me with the novelty, because you wouldn't want something, if it's going to be high quality, you wouldn't want it to be new.
That came, I think, from the business and the idea of sort of when you're coming into a market, if you have a service that is different than what's already there. But you're right, Jackie. I don't think we would see novelty. If we're like, oh, ABA, every one of our RBTs does it a little differently. I think we'd all say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to say you don't have quality.
Right.
I don't know how to define it exactly, but I'm guessing it's not here. I know it when I don't see it.
Yeah, and I guess I can see that in the business field, but describing ABA as something that's novel, that wouldn't occur to me, and it doesn't seem it fits.
Yeah, I would only see it as being useful in the sense of, we have no services. Which service should we purchase? Oh, this ABA looks interesting to me. There, maybe the novelty would be a value. Let's think about context. Let's think about changing the environment, not the person, right? Those are aspects of novelty that I think speak to a number of individuals as to, I like that. That sounds good. I want to pay for that service. So
one could be novel in the sense of you're unique in your excellence. And if that you are doing everything above and beyond, or in like creative ways to provide that level of excellent quality, that is another way to interpret
I like
novel.
that. That's a good interpretation.
But it's still, why don't you just say excellence then?
So they did find examples of quality indicators, but they were sort of all over the place in terms of how they were used. So looking at different practitioners, a lot of practitioners like to think about quality as how close to the 7 dimensions of ABA are my services? And, they cite, Sundberg has a program evaluation form that can be used to look at things like, are FBAs completed? Is there a barrier assessment done? Are the operational definitions behavioral? And, so certainly these are things that are important when we talk about ABA as ABA versus non-ABA services. However, the exact amount of specifics of each item on the list might not be clear enough to have enough IOA to support this as quality. It's also unclear how much following the 7 dimensions leads to positive outcomes, which is going to be a component of quality that you want to look at. Similarly, state departments of education, they bring up New Jersey's Department of Ed that has an autism program quality indicators report that looks at a couple of the same areas that the 7 dimensions might look at, but also looks a little more closely or more specifically at areas around collaboration in the community, collaboration with stakeholders, what curricula are used, what methods are used. But again, kind of some of those same problems of these are helpful things to be looking at, but they're not defined enough to necessarily say, I can objectively measure that you are or are not doing any of the measures on our list. And again, similarly, even if you did have high IOA, yes, we are all providing the highest score on collaboration of our checklist. There's nothing, or there's no data. There are no data to support, and therefore the services are now great versus we are at least doing the thing that we said we would do. But that doesn't mean that we're providing quality services so much as we are being consistent. They looked at blogs and again found similar problems. They looked at professional organizations where they found different problems in that most of the bodies that would do accreditation, so the BACB or ABAI doing sort of school accreditation, they're great organizations, but at the same time, they are not measures of the highest quality. They are measures of minimal standards to get your certification or to be accredited to provide the schooling to get certification.
Yeah, so they're looking at the quality of the educational programming for specialists in the area, but not at the service provision.
Mm-hmm.
So they're doing their jobs. This is just outside their purview. Yeah,
that we want them to do right now,
correct.
Which is not their fault. That's not their job. But even looking at groups like CASP, certainly there are lots of advocates and lots of literature around what are best practices. But again, just knowing best practices is not quite the same as, is this a quality program? So when it comes,
and it's not that these think tanks are not bringing up good ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything you see listed is a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
So they're covering a lot of ground here, and the way in which it's laid out in the study, you're like, oh, good, yeah. Like people should be thinking about like how are the data being collected and protected, and what does the training look like for the agencies? But everyone is kind of coming at it with a slightly different definition of what is quality going to be.
Right. And I think, one thing that I was thinking about is that we might need a different definition of quality at each level of delivery, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we might need a different level, a definition of quality. What does it mean to have high quality services, right? So that's where we might look at like client outcomes, client satisfaction, parent satisfaction, right? We then might also want to look at high quality services related to the professionals that are providing those. Like, what does that look like to them? Are they happy? Are they not stressed? Do they like their work culture? Is it collaborative, right? And then you might want to look at like the quality of supervision. What does that look like? And then like the quality of the systems that are in place to protect all of those lower qualities. And then like the quality of administration. If they have the systems in place to protect the systems, to protect the supervisors, to protect the staff, to protect the clients, right? So I don't think we can just have one definition of quality, like ABA quality, because the layers are they're so separate, like they're so different in a way. I don't know if we could have something that would hit all of them, right?
And I think,
but maybe goals and objectives at each would be helpful.
Yeah, and I think that point, Jackie's not too far from kind of the conclusions of the author.
Yeah, me too.
In terms of some of their calls to action, in that.
I love that part, by the way.
That part's good. I think overall the article is very good. I think it does something that I'm sure a lot of people have asked this question of like, why is there no definition for quality? And then they did what most of us do, which is we go on Google Scholar, or we look in the recent JABAs or BAP, tables of contents. And when we don't find anything, there's a part of us that says, it must just because I'm bad at research, I give up. I'm sure somebody knows the answer. And it is kind of nice to read a paper where the authors say, we couldn't find a definitive answer for the question around quality. And frankly, there might be one, but if it's taking us this much effort to find, you've done a bad job of making it clear what your measures are.
Yeah. And one thing the authors did do is they gave us like the different definitions of quality.
Yeah.
And then they said that they were going to combine them. They think it's best to combine. What I would have liked then is to say, in other words, what we think quality is to give us like a statement of what they think it is. But that wasn't there.
Yeah.
And maybe that wasn't there purposely, right? It might not have been purposely because they also then say that quality has to be contingent on context.
Yeah,
right?
Let's give their definition and then sort of talk about some of the action steps.
Yeah.
Because I think this is an article, on the one hand, I loved parts of it felt like this belongs in BAP. Parts of it felt like this belongs in JOBM.
It's part of it belonged by my bedside.
It did feel a little like it was trying to speak to a lot of audiences, and at various points I became unsure of where they were going. And I'm glad that they ended with the action steps, because if they'd ended with some of the talk about meta contingencies and interlocking behavioral contingencies, that felt like they were jumping a little cart before the horse. Of like, you haven't fully defined this. You've given us some good steps.
But you can tell in those sections that someone is very excited about what they're writing. And there's like varying schematics in there that I had a little bit of a tricky time interpreting.
I had no idea what was going on.
There was varying size in one of the components. They looked identical, but one piece of them was larger and got smaller.
I did not see that. By the way, I was looking at that and I was like, it says, here's an acronym, same acronym. Here's an acronym, same acronym. Here's a circle, same circle. Here's a arrow, same arrow. I could not see the size.
Mm-hmm.
The circle got smaller.
It was very imperceptible. It was obviously perceptible because you
it was,
perceived,
yes.
But it took more effort that I wanted to put into their already a little too OBM business. You gotta know? It's like a magic eye figure.
I did not see that, and I kept rereading it and looking at it and rereading it and looking at it, and oh my gosh, you're right.
Yeah.
I was not attending to the salient features of the circle.
Yeah. But you can tell that someone is very passionate about this, and they are in deep with the material and spend a lot of time with it. So this was a really in-depth discussion of this topic, which is admirable because virtually no one has taken on this type of review that they were doing here. So
the other article we talked about was a study, right? Was nothing near what this is, right? Because that was like, here's a question we have. Here's like, how can we solve the problem of quality?
Right. What is quality?
Yeah. So their goal was, all right, we need to come up with a consensus. We want to come up with a meaningful definition using the information we have, because it's going to be important that we set up a definition so that we can actually control meaningful contingencies, because that's how we're going to lead into what we need, which is both high quality services, leading to high quality outcomes, leading to high quality money at the whole end of the process. So the definition of ABA service quality, quote, the extent to which an organization's ABA products, services, and outcomes meet standards determined by professionals and consumers over time in response to changes in a receiving system while maximizing the financial health of the organization. So the key points here, end quote, and the key points here, I think, and Jackie, you were mentioning this a little earlier, is these standards are probably going to change over time. So to just say, here are the 7 dimensions, they'll never change, is going to be missing some of the components that are going to go into quality, which is the service is not always going to be the same. Maybe that's where we see the novelty coming in. If we're going to see differences as time goes on, as our clientele change.
Like that. Okay. Looking at, adjusting and not staying stagnant.
Yeah.
The novelty. Oh, I'm there. I'm there.
Yeah.
I would call that adaptability.
Oh, maybe.
Well,
but still.
Whatever term people want to use, that's what it means. And the idea that what quality will be and the measures we use are probably going to need to come from internal reviews. We could certainly wait and say, let's come up with a definition and let's have some of our groups just define this is what quality is going to be for everybody. But that may be a long time coming. We don't necessarily know which external groups are going to set up the quality measures. So it's probably in the best interest of organizations to kind of start the work of how do we create standards? How do we create the quality ourselves? We look at research. We look at our consumers of the product. We look at our employees. We set up various systems for gathering information, so probably more qualitative work in those regards, as well as looking at evidence-based practice, which is going to be a combination of what do people think is the best evidence based on their professional experience, and what does the research tell us as to what has the greatest outcome data and generality based on what we know. Because we certainly don't have a study for every single type of individual out there right now. We make a lot of assumptions sometimes, and it's good to know we're doing that because you might need to, but knowing you're doing that and then collecting relevant information is going to be important. And then when you have all that information together, you can create your metrics and then evaluate your interventions systematically. So it's a lot of, and then they get into a lot of the business technology, business techniques. They start talking about cultural behavioral lineage. I could have done without some of these sections because I think it starts getting into the weeds a little faster than some of the definitions that they're able to come up with.
So one thing I think might have been potentially useful is if we made this paper into 2 papers.
Yes.
That's what I was thinking, because when I was reading that part, I felt like I needed to know that, all that stuff, with like the cultural behavioral and the all of that. But I thought that would be helpful as a primer before I read this, because in the middle, I felt like I was reading and then I was like, wait a minute. And then I went back. So if that was like a primer before this paper, like it was a 2-part series and I read that first, got some information, then it would help me better understand their main point. Because I do think I needed that in order to understand what they were talking about when they're talking about, maximum KPIs, which I just learned what they were, right? The key performance indexes.
Yeah.
And understanding the role of what business might say. You have to make money, but you also should be adding an and there, like it should be financially stable and something.
Which is still a weird idea. I mean, I think just because I'm not from like a business perspective, right? Because they kept saying like, well, for it to be quality, it has to meet these markers and it needs to be profitable.
Right. And so I would say that it has to at least be enough to cover the people that you're, right? You can't be in deficit because then you won't have money to pay the people to do the services, right?
Well, I think it's more complicated than that, in that if you're running a nonprofit organization, you just need to have the money to cover expenses.
Right.
But if you are running a for-profit business, you have some number, especially if you're like private equity groups or giving you funding, you have to show growth every quarter. And for most of us, the idea of we just keep making more and more money on our service, we don't really think about it that way. We think about, are we providing meaningful outcomes to clients and their families and other stakeholders?
Right. I mean, I get that you need to have that in order to stay in business, but I don't get what that has to do with being a quality service provider. Is it that you're being responsible?
I think it was the lens of, if you're providing quality services, there is a transactional component that goes into it. And I do wonder if this was an article that sort of, like Jackie was saying, needed 2 parts. One that was more for the audience that would be reading BAP, and one that might be reading JOBM and looking at it from a business perspective. Because there's something that I just inherently find gross when we talk about the money we make as a service. I'm not an idiot. I understand that if we don't make money as an industry, as a service, we can't continue going, regardless of how good our science is. However, when I talk about quality, I care about the human outcomes.
Yeah.
And if I make no money, oh well. So I think you have to be reading service quality as not just, am I doing good ABA? Because I think we can answer the question, are you doing good ABA, in terms of, is this evidence-based practice, a lot easier than we can. Are you providing high quality ABA services, which I think inherently has to have that monetary component. So am I making money in my service delivery while also providing high quality services as measured through a number of metrics related to how much is this evidence-based practice, social validity measurements, training measurements. They even bring up systems like, and how does this result in like cash on hand? So they start getting into the weeds with some of the business measures that you might be interested in looking at for it to be considered high quality services, which is where I lost the thread a little bit.
I just don't think that's how I would define quality, right? I think there's, I guess, good business practice, but to me that is divorced from the quality of services that would be provided. So maybe it's just, my limitations in understanding how this would fit together, or how a more business-minded person is defining quality. But if that's, again, a different definition than what CASP or BHCOE is going to use as quality, then that needs to be a further delineated distinction.
Mm-hmm. It's tricky because I think this article, when you get to the end of it, was really written more for organizations to think about quality. Whereas I think when we thought about it as a topic, and when I started to read the article, I was thinking quality from the perspective of the individual practitioner, or, maybe more loosely, it's sort of the group of practitioners. And when we started looking at that sort of conflation of both, you need to do good ABA, you need to have good outcomes with your clients, and you got to be making money, and you got to be looking at, your conversion rate for referrals, and sort of how do you use quality measures to identify how are you reinforcing your staff for good conversions? Is that resulting in, families getting meaningful services quickly? Right? Those are all questions that I didn't really think about, and to some extent don't want to answer as an individual practitioner. But I guess that's why I don't own a giant ABA service company.
Yeah, but I can't ever, I feel like, stop thinking about this from the perspective of the consumer of the services.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, like, that definition of quality is all about their experience, their outcome, how they view it, how they feel their relationship with their providers was. Like, that's first and foremost. And then next from there, like the health of the organization, in the sense of what the structure of it is, what the service provision looks like, what the training of supervising trainees looks like, and how satisfied they are with the services that they are providing. Mm-hmm. So to me, it's like those two groups are the key groups to determine service quality.
Mm-hmm.
But perhaps I'm just limited in my view, but I don't know that I'm ever going to get away from that as my perspective. And I feel like most of the definitions that we've encountered here are centered around those pieces of service provision.
Mm-hmm. I think on the one hand, the article does a great job of being very clear that looking at ABA services as a whole, there's going to be the money-making component. And we have to ensure, at whatever level you're at, that you are looking at quality services. So the area that you're focused on, Diana. But some of this, I think, is very much a Western impression of what are goods and services. How do we provide human services? And tragically, at least in America and in many parts of the Western world, services cost money and therefore have to have funding or have to make money to be provided. I don't love that, because it limits what we're looking at as quality. And, they have some great graphs looking at, hey, you could have high quality services and be making no money. That's not a high quality service by this definition. You won't last. Because you won't last.
Right. I get that.
Making tons of money and having really poor procedural integrity, in which case you're probably not providing high quality services.
That one I 100% agree with.
Yeah. And I think looking at those different graphs, there's some that I don't care that I'm not making any money. I'm providing the best services according to all the metrics we created. But like you said, Jackie, at the end of the day, your service is going to go out of business, and you're providing zero services if you can't keep the lights on. But again, I don't want
that time that Jackie and I made these really cool charcuterie boards, and we got to take the board home, and they provided us with all of the stuff to go in the board too. And it was only like $35. And I was like, this is a great deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it was. For me, as the recipient, it was high quality.
Yeah.
However, the next time we went to go do it, it cost like 3 times as much, because they realized that they were not making money on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they almost went out of business. I think they're still around.
Oh, goodness.
But they now, everything's much more expensive.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So by that definition, they were not providing quality service in all aspects.
Well, for
quality
them.
to the consumer, but not quality in
exactly.
the sense of being able to continue providing the service.
Yes.
And I don't want to get too much into the weeds of whether that is right or wrong, because I think we all, to some extent, hate that as a definition. Like, I am increasingly disgusted by the viewpoint of my business must make more money every quarter forever and ever. Like, there's an unlimited amount of money to go around for services.
You
And
just
like,
print
that's a
more
good
money.
measure. That's not how money should work, Diana. I do agree that I'd like to look at only the high quality from the, am I providing evidence-based practice?
It's cool.
Am
It
I
is
looking
still
at
open.
I've made
procedural
my
integrity?
point. Okay.
It's still open.
It's still open? Okay, good.
Okay,
I
good.
made sure.
So we don't have all the answers, but we do know this store we haven't mentioned the name of is open.
Phew, so if you want to go.
You still don't know what it is.
So again, we have some limits
It's okay.
to this definition,
It's okay.
but I think they are more philosophical limits than it is to anything the authors are necessarily doing. We sort of talked about how, if you're reading this article, it seems like the audience changes from everyone in the ABA industry from every level to, and anyway, we're assuming you're still reading this, you're the president of your ABA company, and here's what you should be doing. Because we do end with some calls to action that feel very much centered on the organizational level, which may not be as meaningful to all employees. But we've got 6 calls to action, which is always a good way to end your article. But they focus on the leaders in the organization. Are you doing strategic planning around your key performance indicators? And how will you reach those goals? Are you using resources to do training, to support those goals? Are you helping support actions with your staff to engage in actions? Is this in line with the values of your company, your strengths and weaknesses? And then when you do this, did you set up those measures they talked about so that you can determine whether you should keep going or stop or do something different? Did you set up your quality indicators? They have to be tied to both professional and consumer performance, as well as your outcome standards. And then they give an example of what one of those goals could look like, which is in 3 to 5 years, the organization will generate $500,000 in annual revenue, which is usually what a business will write. But a high quality service should also add under conditions in which professional and consumer performance standards and outcomes are met for 3 consecutive quarters. So again, it's that marriage of both, meeting the standards that, we have in our fields, that we create in our organizations, that demonstrate good outcomes for all involved. And we made a bunch of money doing it,
Or even not a bunch of money, but we made
more money.
We made more money.
We made more money.
More money.
And then how are we setting up, progress monitoring? How are we setting up our sort of cycles of improvement using things like total quality management? Again, this is where I was like, I don't have a business degree. Some of these calls to actions are not ones that I can take.
A lot of acronyms.
A lot of acronyms.
A ton of acronyms. So much so that I had to write them down while I was reading and then refer to it because I couldn't keep scrolling.
To some extent, the end boils down to set goals, set monitoring means, review your data, make changes, or continue doing what you were doing. But I think the key take home is if your quality indicators don't have some measure tied into outcomes of services, both outcomes of your professionals and outcomes of your consumers, then just making money should not be considered a high quality service, which I think we would all agree on. So in summary, we need more information from organizational levels of what are the variables that influence quality, what are the quality indicators that are the most meaningful for most ABA service providers, and how are organizations doing this work. So for the everyday practitioner, I don't think you can do all of this. You certainly can look into quality indicators and be doing your part to do evidence-based practice, and you can do your part to hold your organization accountable. Ask to see what are the values of our organization. What are our quality indicators? Do they have phrasing, like we see in this article, related to outcomes of consumers, not just monetary outcomes? And if not, why not? But again, I think this is something that we're not going to have all the answers to right now. But as we see more and more organizations trying to look at quality indicators, we can get more information that we can see, how much generality in some of those measures might there be for other organizations that might not have the time to put into this, some of the smaller organizations. So we don't have all the answers, but I think we all agree this was a good starting point. If
Great
not
starting point. Yeah.
as thorough. I mean, I've gotten used to the idea that when someone is like, no one's answered this question about quality, and we're not going to fully answer it either, but it's going to be better than it was before, and it's going to leave us all in a place where we can continue to do work. And I do appreciate that call to action at the end of the paper, even though some of it was much more business-oriented than practitioner-oriented. Oh, well, I think that brings us to, that kind of was our dissemination station. But I mean, that was kind of mine. I did mine early.
I will add my little point here, which is if you are a clinician or a practitioner, or even someone who maybe owns like a smaller agency and you're listening to this and you feel perhaps overwhelmed by everything that we just said, I would say this article is worth looking at.
Mhm.
You do want to go check it out because to me, the beginning of it gave us a lot of different places to look at and think about how one might define quality, as well as some really useful places to get information regarding the way in which the majority of folks in our field at least direct themselves when they're looking to address quality control within their agencies. So this, even though we like said, like we got into the weeds and everything here, and there's like some complexities in how because they're trying to like take all of this in and hash it up and come up with one definition, but it doesn't mean that no one's ever thought about quality before in our field. They 100% have. And we have several good guidelines that can like lead you as a practitioner or an agency down a path that will most certainly help to establish quality control within your field. Have we exactly defined it? No, but that sometimes gets to be a little bit of a more esoteric type question. What you really want to do is look to see what types of systems you have in place that are going to ensure that there are, what's the word I want to use? Ensure that there are systematic placements throughout your agency with respect to what your expectations are and how those are going to be managed, monitored, and maintained. And then you want to be checking on the outside of what the outcome looks like for your clients and their satisfaction and stakeholder satisfaction with the services that are being provided. Everybody's like in agreement on that. And so if you are able to do that, you are well on your way. So I don't want you to leave this being like, I have no idea. We do know.
All right. Well, Diana, why don't you keep going and share some pairings with us?
Okay. I will tell you a little bit about pairings. We haven't done many episodes that are related to this topic.
Because there's not many things out there.
Yeah, exactly. But I will tell you a couple. That's what I do in pairings is I pick out a few past episodes that might relate here. So I think that you could enjoy listening to episode 233, which was about developing a standard set for autism outcome measures with Dr. Ivy Chong. You might also want to check out episode 180, Promoting Ethical Leadership with Dr. Manuel Rodriguez. You can listen to episode 199, which is on self-care and modern day burnout, because this approach is a way to build in some additional OBM strategies into your workplace. And if you're finding that perhaps you are feeling a little bit burnt out, this might be a new way that you could help contribute to your agency, do a little job crafting there, right? And maybe kind of get rejazzed about everything. That episode is with Dr. Julie Sloviak. Also, 270, Assessing Social Validity. And then back to episode 100, where we talked about the history of ABA with Dr. Gina Green. So those are my recs. They are a little bit tangentially related. I also like to recommend a snack to go with this. And so I'm going to recommend the snack that we had today here at the Utica UCP conference, which was coffee and cannolis. Can't go wrong. Please enjoy.
All right. Thanks, Diana. Well, that brings us to the end of our episodes. Thanks to everybody who voted on the Patreon page, voted on the poll. We'll have another one up in the fall, so in September, for our fall listener choice episode. Just a reminder, if you are a Patreon subscriber at the $5 or up level, don't forget to find the link to see the video version. That's an uncut version. You don't have to watch the uncut video if you don't want to. It's just kind of there for fun. But that is where a bonus code that you will use to get a free CE when you check out will be found. So again, got to find that link. It's on the Patreon page, and you can always certainly message us through there if you're having trouble finding that. For everybody else, let me give you the second secret code that you will need. Actually, everybody needs to know this secret code. It is Half Moon, HALFMOON, Half Moon. And we're not talking about the lunar half moon. We're talking about the cookie that is a Utica staple. We have not had them yet because I kept being told they were coming today, except then Jackie would tell me they're coming tomorrow. So by the time you get this episode in your podcast player, I will hopefully have eaten one. As of the recording, I am half moon cookie less. But that's okay, as long as you know that's a code word. Half moon. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you to everyone for listening. Thanks again to our Patreon subscribers for voting on this episode. It was not one that I don't know if we would have done this episode without it being chosen, because it's a little outside our wheelhouse, but definitely important to talk about. We also want to say, if you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can find links to all of the articles that we discussed in their podcast player or on our website, abainsidetrack.com, where you can find all of the episodes we've ever done, so all the episodes in pairings. And again, if you want some free CEs, as well as access to voting on things like our book clubs and our listener choice episodes, as well as some free CEs and discounts in the CE store, that's patreon.com/ABAinsidetrack. Some final thanks to Dr. Jim Carr for recording our intro, outro music, Kyle Sturry for interstitial music, and Dan Thabit of the Podcast Doctors for his amazing editing work. We'll be back next week with another fun-filled episode. But until then, keep responding. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.